Good morning. First Tim, now you. Isn't Jesus wonderful? All right. So I have another list for you. Stupid warning labels. Okay? This ties in, believe it or not. But these are warning labels that just don't need to exist. So on a wheelbarrow, it says not intended to be used on the highway. I feel like I know that person. I don't know. Somehow they're related to me. On a Dremel rotary tool, it says not to use for dental drill. I got to know how many times this has happened before they said, we really should put a label on there. That's the epitome of I have a friend who can do it cheaper, right? Like, he's got a rotary drill. You go to the back of his van. On sleeping pills, warning label says may cause drowsiness. Duh. On a baby stroller, remove child before folding. Folding the stroller or the baby. On an iPod shuffle, do not eat. Mom, apples are good for you, right? On a jet ski, never use a lit match or open flame to check fuel level. You don't say. On a hairdryer, do not use while sleeping. I know you're disappointed. Trust me, it's not a good thing. On a bottle of blowtorch fuel, contents may catch fire. Again, why do we need this? Natural selection is there for a reason. Oh. On a carton of eggs, warning, may contain eggs. May? It better. New Holland's small tractors, they put the label avoid death. I don't think you have to tell anybody that, but okay. On a vanishing ink fabric marker, it says this should not be used as a writing instrument for signing checks or legal documents. Come on, that'd be hilarious. What are you talking about? I need that for the next marriage I perform. Just, let me sign your slip. There you go. This will make Christmas a real pain for the kids, but Grandma thought it was hysterical. So, here's your check. On a bottle of MDW's outdoor group's Fox Bobcat urine powder, there is a label that says not for human consumption. Lastly, on a Scrubbing Bubbles long-handled toilet brush, it says do not use for personal hygiene. How far are you willing to go to really get clean? Clean my grout. These are real labels, and they're needed for some reason. We find it hard to imagine that people do these things. But then again, I never thought anyone would try to use Gorilla Glue as hairspray, for instance, and then sue when it worked too well. If people ignore warnings and their own common sense, what do they expect? You can't complain. So last week we had breakfast. I don't remember much else. Oh wait, no. We talked about that weird prophecy with Judah and Tamar that was offered at the wedding. This week we can finally wrap up Ruth and get back to Revelation. We're looking at that Redeemer thing. Boaz is the kinsman redeemer, or the Goel in Hebrew. We can look at this book now and clearly see the ways the book references Jesus. Boaz is the redeemer, Ruth is the bride, Naomi as well. Well, anyway, we'll get to that. There's this shoe, like a marriage license, and references the tabernacle, so there's all that. We went through all this. So now we tie it all together. So Boaz is a type of Jesus. We know this. A type is in foreshadowing. We are stuck with this important inheritance issue, sin. Sin means we inherit what? Death and hell. That's it. That's our inheritance. And we're stuck with that. So we need to change it. But how do we change our inheritance? Nothing we can do. We literally cannot change our inheritance. It's what we're stuck with. So we need help. And God saw this predicament. He created mankind with free will. Free will to choose how to use Gorilla Glue. He knows, like we do, though, that slavery is not love because it isn't chosen. He wants you to choose to love him, choose to like him, because he is good. He's gracious, he's loving. I say both because there's a difference. You can love somebody and not like them, right? You cry at their funeral, but you won't go on vacation with them. There's a difference. So he wants your love, your respect, like a devoted and devotion, like a husband wants from his wife. It means nothing if we force that. It loses all meaning. It leads to bitterness, resentment, hate. The opposite way is sin, and Satan took advantage of man and showed them a worse way, a way that gets them taken from God's grace and into his program. But he hates us. He hates God even more. He wishes for all of humanity to suffer and feel the way he does. The phrase misery loves company is epitomized in the devil. So he lied, he cheated, he manipulated mankind into following him from the beginning without telling us that this so-called freedom only leads to hell and separation from God. It is a choice, but don't be fooled. It's 100% our choice. God went out of his way to fix this, not by overriding our will, not by forcing mankind to do one or the other, but mankind chose to sin. They chose to rebel. They chose to go to hell. People say God forces his will on us. He forces people to go to hell. Why would he, if he loved us, why would he force us to go to hell? God has justice, and that justice is beyond any human understanding of justice. And it must be fulfilled. All justice will be fulfilled. Even when humans try to get in the way of it, which we see all the time now, it will be fulfilled. The idea, like when your parents tell you you can't drive until you have a license, and you want to take your friends out to drive because you got a permit, and then you get in a wreck, and you hurt one of your friends. You don't blame your parents. You feel horrible because what you did caused harm to somebody else. Most would never try to blame their parents for this. They took the car out. They did this. They know it's their fault. That's why they feel so bad about it. Your parents told you the right way to behave. They told you what to do and what not to do. The way that is best, that prepares you for the best. And you chose the other way. The kid chose the other way. Now people are hurt. Damage is done. Punishment is served. We don't like it, do we? We wish many times, if we're honest, we could take back things in our lives, don't we? If you're honest and you were presented with a chance to change certain things in your history, there are things you'd change. All of us have them. The things that we regret, even though those things make us who we are today, but many of those things haunt us daily, reminding us of our own instabilities, our own failings, our own shortcomings, proving how capable or incapable we are, no matter how great we start to think we are. This is what happens in the world all the time. Many a movie short was produced in the 40s through the 60s trying to teach teens to listen, giving wisdom. I don't know if you remember any of those, showed up right before a movie. You always watch the little shorts, little serials. And they had things like I Accuse My Parents, different little black and white shorts. Ideas of this is a better way to be, this is a better way to live, this is a better way to behave. They even had I remember one on grooming, that I saw that it was just, this is what you do when you wake up. Here's a girl, she wakes up, brushes her hair, takes care of herself. Here's a boy, he's dirty. And so you had these two juxtaposed in this short. But the idea that this used to be normal, we always have these ways of trying to show a teen a better way or a kid a better way, and that there are consequences if you do it your way. Things don't work out the same way. God has given us this. He's given us a handbook to teach us the same thing. to show us examples of how people are flawed, how they're sinful, how they're corrupt, and they always head towards sin. We look at the people in the Bible and we look at them as these great figures of faith. But when you actually look at their lives, you don't see perfection. When you look at their lives, you see failing after failing after failing. But you see how their faith brought them through it, or how it didn't. The Bible's a great show of this, of what humanity can be, even at its worst, but what God can do through them. This was a way to help us avoid sin, a way to help us live a better life. But we have removed it from society. Society as a whole is trying to remove it. Remove the Bible, remove God, remove the commands, remove moral teachings and moral standards, and say that everybody can live their own. But then when they do this, what do we see? War, death, shootings, all the bad things we see all the time. What do we expect? Really, what do you expect? They don't get to turn around and blame God because they removed him, because they don't want to follow the rules. He told you the better way to do it. You chose to do it your way. And that's what sin is every time we do it. Every time we sin, in that moment, we think our way is better. We approach it as, I know, God, you told me not to, but I know a better way. And then you go that way. And then, oops, guess what? You were right, God. He's always right. It's crazy. We want to see justice meted out. We want everyone to receive what they're due until it's us. And you see that. You see it on the news, right? Everyone wants justice. But then there's that person complaining because justice was done. But it's not fair. For one reason or another, it's not fair. We want to see everyone fall for their sins, be held accountable. But we have this innate tendency to hate it once it's happened. So when we examine our lives and we see sin, and we see mistakes, we get defensive. We push back. And we end up rejecting God and his grace to serve our own egos. His justice knows no equal. It had to be met. But it creates a problem. How does he get any of his creation into heaven when he lets them have their own way? Because that's not where they'll go. He knew this. The Bible refers to what's called the everlasting covenant. It was cut between Jesus and the Father before the creation of the universe, where he said, if we do this, you know what's going to happen. Yeah. You know what it requires. Yeah. Are we still going to do it? Yeah. Okay. But he cut that before anything ever was created. Jesus knew. God sent him to redeem us from our inherited curse of sin. This inherited death and hell, that's all we get. That's all we deserve. We need him to do this, or what do we have? Nothing. So we have to have someone step in as a redeemer to save us. So let's look at the observations that can be made from this book. We've looked at Ruth. Let's see as I go if you can jump ahead and piece it together before me. In order for Ruth to bring Naomi back, you notice Naomi had to be exiled from her home country first. Okay. Interesting. What the law could not do, grace did. We discussed this with the tabernacle last week. Ruth, you just look at the story. Ruth did not replace Naomi. They are separate entities with separate destinies. Ruth learns the way of Boaz from Naomi. She needed Naomi to see how any of this worked. But Naomi was only brought to Boaz, only meets Boaz through Ruth. No matter how much Boaz loved Ruth and wanted to be the redeemer for her, he could do nothing until she asked. She had to make the first move. Boaz, not Ruth. Boaz had to be willing, he had to be able, he had to be kin, and he assumed all responsibility in this arrangement. Boaz, not Ruth, had to confront the nearer kinsman to earn the right to redeem her. She did nothing. So with all this in mind, the book is read on Pentecost every year by the Jews. This is the book they read. On our birthday, they read a book about the church. So we can see that Boaz is Jesus. Naomi is Israel, disenfranchised from her land, looking for it to be redeemed. Ruth is the church or the bride, also looking for redemption, but only because of what Israel has shown her of God. We learn it's possible because of them and because of the Redeemer who comes from them. We become the bride to the kinsman Redeemer, and this allows him to redeem the land and restore Israel. We ask. Jesus had to be willing, check. He had to be able, check. He had to be kin, check. He became man. And he alone assumes the responsibility of the redemption, check. He had to confront the nearer kinsman, the one closer to us who could not redeem us, who could not fulfill their obligation, that could not redeem the land, could not redeem us from sin, could not redeem us from our inheritance. The nearer kinsman is the law, broken, defeated, useless, and unable to function beyond its current state. The only thing it promises is death. Pretty cool. Okay, that's cool. That's impactful, Pastor Stephen. What the heck does it have to do with Revelation 5? I'm glad you asked. I mean, that's why I brought you here. Let's reread Revelation 5, verses 1 and 2. I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a book, scroll, written on the inside and the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the book and break its seals?" So, there's a scroll. You know what scroll looks like. And you can debate how this looks. It could be rolled 2 sides together or just a scroll. Either way, it's rolled together and there are 7 wax seals pressed on it. Okay? There's writing on the inside, clearly. You can see that when the way it's rolled. But there's also writing on the back, just on the back. This is not, I ran out of room on the front and wrote on the back. This is something else is written on the back. So what is it? Now let's turn to Jeremiah 32. And I want to look at verses 6 through 14. And Jeremiah said, "The word of the Lord came to me, saying, Behold, Hanamel, the son of Shalom, your uncle, is coming to you, saying, Buy for yourself my field, which is at Anathoth, for you have the right of redemption to buy it." Then Hanamel, my uncle's son, came to me in the court of the guard, according to the word of the Lord, and said to me, buy the field, please, that is in Anathoth, which is in the land of Benjamin, for you have the right of possession, and the redemption is yours. Buy it for yourself. Now, we read Ruth, so we can kind of piece together what's going on here. I knew this was from the Lord. I bought the field, which was at Anathoth from Hanamel, my uncle's son. I weighed out the silver for him, 17 shekels of silver. I signed and sealed the deed and called in witnesses and weighed out the silver on the scales. He took the deeds of purchase, both the sealed and the copy containing the terms and conditions of the open copy, and I gave the deed of purchase to Baruch, the son of Neriah, the son of Maaseiah, in the sight of Hanamel, my uncle's son, and in the sight of the witnesses who signed the deed of purchase, before all the Jews who were sitting in the court of the guard. And I commanded Baruch in their presence, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, take these deeds, this sealed deed of purchase, and open the deed and put them in an earthenware jar, that they may last a long time. And you say, okay, Pastor Stephen, you're jumping more. Did you take your pills? Maybe. That has nothing to do with this. So this is a key part of the law of redemption, which is why we're here. And Ruth just explained to us the law of redemption. Israel belongs to who? God. The whole world belongs to God. But he claims Israel, this spot. That's his land. Not as we know it today, because his border is much bigger. It should be much larger than it is today. It is established in the word more than once. But because Israel's people are his people, they get to live there. He brought them to his land. It's not Israel's lands per se, but because it's God, his people live there. Just like you own a house, but your kids, as your children, live there. It's your house. And they might inherit it if you set it up that way. But they live there. Now the land stays as God's. And it must stay as he proclaims it for Israel's use. This is the reason behind a lot of international issues today. Because nobody recognizes this fact. Israel doesn't have access to the land as it should. It has no bearing on their behavior, right or wrong. It was a one-sided covenant between Abraham and God, where he had him cut these animals in half and put them like this, and he said, we will walk through between the animals together. Abraham says, okay. Abraham's standing there waiting for God, and God knocks Hammy out, and he walks himself between the animals. Abraham's knocked out by a tree. God walks through. Why? The animals are symbolic in that time. And it's saying, when we cut this covenant, if either party breaks this covenant, let be done to us what is done to these animals. They walk in the blood that's flowing between them, making this covenant. But he didn't let Abraham walk. God walked. So only God is making this covenant. And only God is saying, if I break it, you can do to me what you've done to these animals. Abraham's not part of it. He's making the covenant to Abraham. But Abraham's not making it back. It makes it a one-sided covenant. This way, only God has to deal with it. And neither Abraham nor any of his descendants can ever break it because they're not part of the deal. They're the ones receiving. When Joshua entered the land is then broken up between the tribes. Each has access to their portion, and they must keep it in the family or violate this. According to the law of redemption found in Leviticus 25, 23 through 28, and 47 through 54, you could sell the land, but it wasn't a sale, it was a lease. You sold the rights to use the land for a set amount of time. It doesn't matter the length, really, because at the 50-year year of Jubilee, all land returned to its owner anyway. Went right back to the family. It always stayed in the family. It always stayed within the tribe. Okay? Every tribe had their land. And this way, it was a way of nobody being able to ever flake on a deal one way or another. Because, for instance, if you had a debt you couldn't pay, you could let somebody else use your land and make up the money. And then we talked about that. You could become a slave, which was just an indentured servant, and you'd work for them to pay off that debt. Either way works. But on that year, everything goes back. All those deals cut. So nobody really wants to make a deal on year 48 or 49 because they ain't getting anything out of it, right? You make that deal year 1, oh yeah. Let's say that couldn't be followed. Like, let's say you died before the return of the land. So how do you get it back? You made this deal, but you die before the end of the deal, before the Jubilee or the end of the deal. What do? Well, there's a title deed. And the title deed had a procedure for how it could be redeemed. And this is written on the back of the scroll. There was procedure legally that had to be followed, and the person had to follow the steps on the back or meet the conditions written on the back. Jeremiah was instructed to buy this land from his cousin before Israel goes to Babylon, so that when they come back, the descendants can claim the land back rightfully. They have the title deed, and they match it. Notice he told the guy to open it beforehand. He is the one that meets the criteria. He said, open it and then put it in a jar. That way, your descendants don't have to meet the criteria. They just have the title deed. You know where you buried it. We'll know where you buried it. We can come back and get it. And that's exactly what happened. Later on, they come back. They have the deed. They've got their land. Okay? On the outside's written the requirements for the redemption process. Only the person who met those conditions could open the deed. So who's the rightful owner of all of creation? The Lord. He made it. Adam had a title deed. What did he do with it? He handed it over for an apple. No, for his wife. He handed it over to Satan. Jesus tells us the owner of the house is Satan. He talks about it. But somebody breaks in. If the owner had known, he would have taken precautions, indicating the same thing we learn later. If the enemy had known the plan of crucifixion, he never would have crucified Christ. He follows the rules of redemption to take it back. And here in Revelation 5, what you see is a title deed, indicated by the seals and the requirements written on the back. What we also see is that John knows this. And if you look at verse 4, John begins to violently cry and convulse in Greek. Not that he's crying in Greek, in Greek that's what it says. Because he knows what this means. If I had to guess, he knows who holds the rights to earth. That is now sitting in heaven waiting to be claimed. Someone has to claim it, but they have to meet those requirements. Now, John would automatically think of who? Jesus, right? He believes he's the Messiah. He's the one that's supposed to redeem everything. So he knows who to look for. But it says in verse 3, they look everywhere. They look on the earth, above the earth, and below the earth, in the earth. You figure those out. But they look everywhere. And how many people they find? None. What does this tell you as John? Is your faith well-founded? In that moment, your identity that's wrapped up in the Messiah is shattered because you were banking on this guy. And now all of a sudden, he's not here. No one is found qualified what would this do to you? This was the whole point. You were here, right? You're crying convulsively because you know your land can't be redeemed until somebody can open that. And the person you're counting on can't be found. Do you see where this would lead you? How would you respond? No one matches the requirements. This is a crucial part of your culture and the redemption of the land that you've been told about for millennia. Jesus was the Messiah, right? This is literally an existential crisis for John. John begins to weep convulsively because he cannot process that. His whole life has been lived for this. He walked with him before and after death. He saw a man be God and do things no one else could do, but he can't do this. And then one of the elders of the church says, stop crying and look. And there stands Jesus as he was slain. Means scars, bruises, wounds, everything. As he was slain. He still carries those scars. You could say the only man-made things in heaven are scars. He keeps them. They are his worthiness. He stands there, the only person ever worthy of even touching that scroll. Jesus takes the scroll because he meets the requirements on the back of that list. He's redeemed it as the nearer kinsman. He's proven that the other kinsman can't do it. He's met every condition more than anybody could ever meet. And he's proven the right to redeem everything. This is what Ruth has to do with Revelation 5. Now he will start to open that title deed soon as we go through. And as he does, he breaks seal one at a time, seal by seal, the 7 seals of Revelation. And what happens when he breaks those seals? Oh, bad things. As he breaks those seals, he is starting to claim it back. Judgment is doled out. Creation is slowly being redeemed. Sin is being judged. And the enemy is reacting. And you see this as we go through. You'll see him do it. It causes repercussions on earth. So, in closing, we see a very clever idiom here in Ruth. For the church, for the whole story and the plan of salvation. I think it's a really cool idiom. I think it's an amazing testimony to how salvation works, our roles in that, and best of all, it's all hidden where? In the Old Testament. It's hidden in the Old Testament. The part that no Jew would hide this in. Especially if it's just the random writings of man anyway. I hope you see why I love this book so much. This is why I push the ideas I push. It's why I want you to see the Old and New Testament as one. You cannot have one without the other. You cannot have the New Testament or Ruth without the groundwork of the Old Testament, Naomi. Can't have it. We have in salvation a one-sided covenant with God, just like Abraham's for the land. Most covenants are cut conditionally. They're cut between 2 or more people. And there's things that both have to do. Ours is one-sided. Ours is a cut that says, I take responsibility for the redemption if you take the offer. He has to handle it all. Abraham, he agreed to be part of it. He prepared the way. He built the altar and everything. We ask God to join us in salvation. But just like with Abraham, he walks it. We didn't walk it. Instead of walking between the animals, he died on our cross. He took our sin. He took our punishment. He did the work. We get to take the offer. You want to talk about unfair? God was offering, not the other way around. We don't offer him anything. He cut a one-sided deal with us to redeem us because he took it all on himself. Boaz is like Jesus, a type or a foreshadowing of him. But like Jesus, notice that Boaz could not act until he was called upon and asked to do so. So he is free to move for you. He is free to redeem you. He is qualified to do so. He has every legal authority to do it, but he can do nothing until you ask him to. Jesus died on the cross for you. And today, he says in Revelation 3:20, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him and him with me. The move is yours. You have to ask him. You have to accept him. He can't do a thing until you let him. So don't let that pass you by any longer. Let's stand and sing.